There's room up here for both of us. It's so fun to be back here in Sandwich. And as Nil said, I'm John Nye, and one of the great pleasures that I had in my professional career was when John Cullity asked me to join the board. And one of my it's not a greatest disappointment, but one of my disappointments is that I haven't been as involved with the board as I should have been over the years. I figured business travel would bring me to the Cape. I could work those into board meetings on the Wednesdays and all this jazz, and it just hasn't panned out the way I planned. But
we got here.
We do get here from time to time, and it is really fun to be back here today. And we are going to have some fun this afternoon, the next hour and a half or so. So as Nil said, please ask questions. This is an interactive forum. We did not prepare a slideshow because we all know PowerPoint presentations, particularly when they're read from the speaker, are just deathly boring. And we want to avoid that to the greatest extent possible. So what can we talk about today? How about life in a big auction house? We can talk about life in a small regional auction house. We can talk about life at the Antiques Roadshow and behind the scenes. I will put it out to you guys. If you need encouragement, I can start the conversation in some direction and then work it back a different direction, or I can make minor corrections to what Nil said in the introduction and use that as the launching pad for our conversation today. So I'm game for just about anything, and Kathy's a good sport, so she's game for just about anything as well. So would you guys like to start, or would you like us to start?
You start.
You want me to start? Okay. Now I have cold feet. I don't know what to say.
Your life started. Yeah, you started something.
In this whole business? Well, how did I start in this business? I think the easy answer is the fact that I grew up on the Battle Green in Lexington, Massachusetts. Not on the Battle Green, but across the street from the Battle Green. So effectively, I was inundated with American history and played the fife in the fife and drum corps and marched in the parades on Patriots Day, which people used to know April 19th was Patriots Day. Now they think it's Marathon Monday or opening day at Fenway or something like that. I mean, you can see people...
Or a day off of school.
Right. Why are we off school today? Exactly. It's attitudes have changed towards history and towards scholarship and toward antiques and collecting. Lots and lots of reasons why that may have occurred, some of which we can get to later. But after college, I knew I wasn't going to be going into medicine or finance or law, and so I spent a year with an architecture firm in Cambridge and then went to Sotheby's in 1988 and worked my way up from being an intern to a department head, and after 15 years, we went and started or acquired the local auction house in New Jersey, and we've been doing that for more than 15 years now. So that's all very well and good. The fact that I can measure my career in decades now is kind of terrifying, but it's still going well. We're having a good time. Kathy and I participated in a dinner in Morristown where they brought people in to host tables, and the guests at the table would ask various people from the community in sports or finance or the legal profession or the arts or whatever else questions. And it started off with one of the inevitable go-to questions that auctioneers always get, and that is, okay, you probably haven't heard this before. What's the most expensive thing you've ever sold? We hear that all the time. Or what's the most interesting thing you've ever seen? I mean, those types of crazy questions. Well, I can tell you the most expensive thing we ever sold, and I can tell it to you in a minute, or I can let Fox Business News tell it to you in a half an hour, because they did a segment on strange inheritance last year over a painting that we sold. Yeah. Some of you may have seen the episode, but it turned up. It was a day like today, but it was in the summertime. It was in July, and I did a house call in a modest Tudor-style house in New Jersey, and down in the basement, I was supposed to look at some silver, a few paintings, and some bric-a-brac, things that the brothers had decided they could live without after going through their parents' estate. They kept what they wanted. These were in the cellar. Would they be suitable for your auction? So
The silver was great.
the silver was great. Yeah, there were some odds and ends, and there were about a dozen paintings, some landscapes, some maritime things, a couple of portraits, and the portrait that seemed to be the most uninspiring and the least interesting turned out to be the lottery ticket for this family. And it's often the case that happens when we go into somebody's house. Come on in.
Come on in.
You're looking for one thing and you find another. Tell me.
Yeah. So normally when we go into people's houses, they always have the thing that their parents say is the most expensive, it's the most valuable, and it's never, ever the case. It's always the dreadful, ugly green thing in the corner that they've always hated that is worth, a few $1,000s, and that precious, cup is worth $1.
Right. Folklore, family lore, the heirloom story, all that
Right.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's
Over and over again, every single time.
Right, so you go in looking for the rugs and you come out with the paintings. Or you go in looking at the paintings and you come out with the pottery or something. It's rarely what they ask you to come and look for. So working in a regional auction house gives you the opportunity to handle a whole slew of things. And it's better to be a little bit versed in a lot of things than a lot of bit versed in a few things. Because when I was at Sotheby's, I ran the Americana department. So that was a specialty of 1680, either things made for this country, either made in or made for this country between 1680 and 1830. 1830 being the end of it because that was essentially the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So handmade for that 150-year period. And Kathy, I digress here a little bit, but Kathy used to say, "You work for a multinational corporation. Can't
Let's move to Paris."
Right. Let's go to London. Let's go to Hong Kong. Get us transferred. Let's go someplace instead of New York. Well, there was a small problem with that, and that is I specialized in a very, very, very useless department. It was a ton of fun, but it wasn't applicable anywhere else except
New York.
the Northeast. And maybe from Chicago to Washington and northeast of there, but it gets pretty thin south of Philadelphia, the level of interest. So we didn't travel internationally for my job, but we do find things that come from all over the place. And being in that environment and having to know a little bit about a lot, you see all kinds of different things. And so in the basement of the house, sure, I wasn't doing research. I wasn't giving the guy estimates. I was just going by that sixth sense that women are born with and men have to acquire of, feels pretty good. I think that's all right. I think we can sell that, all those kinds of things. And so I said, yes, we'll take that. I go back to the house in August to load my car. It's about 8 o'clock in the morning. It's one of those just horrific August days in New York where you're just so muggy. I'm dripping sweat, and I'm thinking, why did I do this? Grousing to myself, of course, on the inside and on the outside.
He could have hired a mover, but no, he came himself because it was only 2 miles from our house.
Right. So on the inside, it's like, on the outside, oh, this is so fun. I love it when I get it into the car, get it back to the auction. It's September. Fast forward the tape, it's September. We have a fantastic auction up online, and we do them online and in person. So we'll be conducting a sale, much as we are here in the front of the room, flanked by computer terminals for international bidding. And a very nondescript painting about this big was hanging on the wall about this high.
We have a silver counters, lots and lots of silver counters. I was managing silver. It's one of my specialties. And this little painting was just hanging out right there, and I can tell you not a soul looked at it. It was kind of dreadful.
But only, right. And then 3 people called to request telephone bids. Nobody in the States
not a single person
recognized the significance of the painting. I realize this is backwards. And so they requested their phone bids. We put them on the phone. The guy in London got blown out instantaneously. The guy in Germany lost to the guy in Paris.
It was my guy on the telephone.
And coincidentally. And it turns out that the painting that we had estimated correctly, because we didn't know what it was, and we thought it might have been 19th century instead of 17th century, and et cetera, turned out to be quite an expensive piece of art. And so this is the copy. I said copy. This is not the painting, but this is
a prop.
This
This
is
was
the
the prop.
copy that they used on Strange Inheritance when they reenacted the
So
television
they created
series.
this and put it in. The frame that our piece was in was a very garish Victorian. It was jammed in there, you know.
Right, so it wasn't in its original frame. It had some water damage. It had lots of, needed to be cleaned. There were lots of problems with the
It
picture.
was a little darker than this too.
And it turned out that after a $500 to $800 pre-sale estimate, it sold for $1.1 million because it turned out to be a Rembrandt. And
One of the earliest ones.
people didn't come to look at it. The folks that requested the telephone bid didn't want to show their cards.
They didn't
So-
ask for any photographs. They didn't ask for any condition reports. They didn't send anyone that I knew of because no one took it off the wall. And we had 3 phone bids, and I do the phone bidding, and I assign the phone bidders, and Amy and I were, you
So
know,
the other thing
bidding
that was,
along.
right, so little bit of background color here is when people bring us Dutch paintings, they're rarely 17th century. They're often 19th century, and they were copies by artists who were trying to hone their skills, sitting in a museum in front of the real thing, practicing. At the roadshow, that's the same case. Oftentimes, they're even 20th century. And if they do turn out to be 17th century, they are rarely, almost never, by known 17th century painters, let alone household names today. So for us to say 500 to 800, oil on board, Dutch school, 19th century, wasn't particularly incorrect because, as Kathy said, it was also in a big Victorian frame.
But in that sale, we also had old master drawings, very good old master drawings. And we had a few old master experts in-house looking at them. One was sitting in the audience bidding on
Right
it.
about as far as you are.
Yeah, like right there, who never looked at this painting. Yeah.
And two other crazy parts, little anecdotes. When the bidding was happening, the bidders sometimes they'll try to intimidate the competition by jumping the bid. So if you're at 500, they might say 800 instead of going 550, 600, 650, 700. They'll just jump it a few $100.
Kind of shake them.
Right. In this instance, the guy from Germany tried to intimidate Kathy's phone bidder, who was in Paris, by
Who was
jumping
a
at
cool-
$100,000 increments. And that's when I started to clue into the fact that something was up here.
And the galleries are open too. We have a small auction podium, and we have like a little sitting area. And we also had the galleries open, and people were there. And all of a sudden, everyone started emptying out the gallery to say, like, what the heck is happening?
Right. They all showed
There.
up in the sales room.
Yeah. And
So-
prior to that, our most expensive painting was like in the $250,000. And so we got to that point, my bidder got to that point, and I thought, okay, we just broke that. And I was like, he was so calm. And my friend Amy, who is our colleague, was on the other line. We were on landlines because we were calling internationally. And she was just laughing and giggling, and her fellow was just chatting away, telling her a million things. And
So he
very
said,
exciting.
right. And so just to finish up here with this story, many people have asked, after they ask, what's your most expensive painting? They say, how could somebody spend $1 million on this thing without having looked at it? And for any of you who want to see the reason, come up and I'll show you on my phone what it looks like. But the explanation is, this painting was done by Rembrandt as a teenager, 1625-ish. He was about 15. He did an allegory of the 5 senses, 3 of which were known. They all included 3 characters in fancy dress with ruddy complexions and exaggerated features, and each one told a different story about sight, hearing, taste, sound, and all that stuff. And the one for smell was missing. We discovered it unwittingly. And the one for taste is still missing.
so check your basements.
And call us. If you have something that looks like this.
Something dreary.
Right. If you think you have a remarkably unremarkable painting, as I have said 1,000 times, give us a call because it could be the other one. So the other crazy bit about this was that one person who came to pick up other purchases from that auction said, "Oh, that old thing, if I had bought it," she bid on it, or she claimed she bid on it, she actually didn't. She was going to bid on it. She said, "Oh, I would have thrown the painting away because I thought the frame was fantastic, but the painting was so ugly." And I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you just said that. That's priceless." So I do have some pictures I can share of that after the fact, but that's usually a good icebreaker when people want to hear about the most expensive thing or the craziest story or something like that. Pieces also turn up in the most unlikely places, and that's another example. That was in a basement, but I'll tell you, we've been in hoarders' houses where you practically need hazmat suits to go through and figure out what's right.
It's true. In my bag.
You think I'm joking?
In my bag, I
or
have
do you
a
live
little
in
jar.
such a house? Did I just call you out?
But I do carry a little bottle of Vicks because sometimes the houses are just.
And then and then one year I was in a $75 million apartment on Central Park South, and I'd been there once, and I said to our son, whose name happens to be Tupper, I said, "Come on back. You got to come to work with me today." And it was one of those, "Oh, do I have to?" He hated working at the auction house. And I said, "Well, we're going into the city today. We're going to a place you'll probably never see again in your life." So we took the elevator up, $75 million duplex, and they ordered lunch that day for us. And she said, "Would you guys like a sandwich or something?" I was like, "Yeah." There were some movers there. "I'll take a sandwich," etc. So the elevator opens, and out come 3 of those room service bellhop carts, piled high. One with sandwiches, one with desserts, another laden with drinks. And they were all coming up from the Ritz-Carlton, which was underneath. So room service came up to this apartment, and I mean, it was like living large. You could sit in the bathtub and look straight up Central Park South. So we've seen it all those places, the places that are just so filthy and the places that you just boggle the mind. And everything in between. Yes, indeed. You don't have to be rich to be filthy. I can attest to that. I've been there, but I can't tell you whose houses they are. I have to protect their identities.
Can you tell us about your personal passion? What would really play? The painting seems to be pretty exciting and money-wise.
It is. Well, you know something? I'll tell you. That's a good question. I was asked to do an auction for somebody else, to be a contract auctioneer, essentially. And I sold a piece for almost $1 million and then another one for about $1.5 million. And it was not exciting. And in the furniture world, I mean, you sell paintings. The big auction houses sell paintings for multiples, tens of millions, hundreds of millions these days. And that's telephone numbers. And it was sort of it's kind of selling something for more than $1 million, to be the auctioneer and to gavel it down. Oh, wait a second. I have a gavel. You guys have a formal gavel in here, but this one's made out of birch bark by a friend of mine, and it's because I'm just a country auctioneer now, so I have a birch bark gavel. But to gavel down something for more than $1 million is sort of the holy grail of auction, owning your own auction. And I went and did it for this guy twice that day. And I didn't get the butterflies or the goosebumps or the rush.
Well, you didn't like it either. You didn't like the pieces. They were modern.
One of them was a Philadelphia tea table, pie crust tea table, which is from my sweet spot of Americana. But it felt so mercenary to be doing it like that. When we did this painting, it was so unexpected and so exciting, and so, I mean, we went from 500 to 10,000, and then slowly to 50,000 and 60, and then at 130 it went to 200, and at 210 it went to 300. I mean, I was sitting there.
He kept jumping.
Fortunately, I have a podium it's a desk essentially, because behind the stage, my knees were going like this, practically, and I'm trying to control my voice, and I'm thinking, what is happening here? And then I'm like, was I at 150 or 160? Wait, what's the next increment? I'd never been up that high before. It was crazy. And that was a rush. I mean, that was like bungee jumping. And I never even got off the ground. So that was pretty cool. Now, my own interest, I do love Americana. That's where I spent so many years chasing the brown wood, as it's known today, pejoratively. But I'm also infatuated with the Dutch colonization of the Hudson Valley, essentially from New York to Albany, the forts they built, the things that they brought over, their willingness to embrace different cultures and religions and creeds, and which essentially turned New York into the Empire State ultimately, but it was the first melting pot. It was a place to do business. It was a colony for business. It wasn't a colony for religion. And the things that they've provided, whether it was done here in this country or in Holland, they were a remarkable culture. And it was 400 years ago that they were doing this. So their glass is beautiful, their furniture is exotic, their houses are perfectly proportioned, drop dead gorgeous. They may not be huge, but they're fantastic. And so I don't collect Dutch, but I love it. I mean, that's sort of what lights my fire now, because I kind of did the Americana thing, which sounds like I've moved on, and I certainly haven't. I still love a good piece of American furniture. You know, I remember having an intern at Sotheby's one time, and I said, look at that table. And she's like, yeah, it's a table? I said, look at that table. That look at the top. That is good wood. I mean, the mahogany is swirling. It's like the ripples on a trout stream, and there's an eddy back there, and you know the fish is laying under here where the grain is all tight. And she was looking at me as I had lost my mind. And a year later, she got into it, and she started to understand the significance of it, where the wood came from, being imported from the Caribbean, and et cetera, and it wasn't just picked in the backyard. And she never let me live down that comment about it being, that is good wood. I mean, I heard that for as long as she worked for me, and it was funny. That's still the case.
But personally, we do have a lovely collection of sandwich glass. We have a lot of colorless glass. Candlesticks.
Fluid lamps.
What's the name of it?
Waterfall base.
The waterfall base, which we love. We have an awful lot of it. And anything Nye, we collect Nye oil things, and we have a lot of.
That's true. We do
Nye.
pick up some Nye things from time to time.
Yeah.
As Lynn said, it's harder to go online and search for Nye because you get all these New Year's Eve concert announcements.
Woohoo!
And that makes it, the sifting takes longer to sift through those types of posts. But we do have, I actually bought a really cool whaling journal from 1861 up in the North Atlantic, and that's a Nye journal, and it has stamps of the chocks of the whales that they were either seen or taken or things. So that's pretty cool. And
There's some examples in the house of those too.
So that type of thing. What else? Kathy's a silver specialist, but we don't buy a whole lot of silver. Mm-hmm. She tends to go toward the Danish modern silver. But I guess Nye has some Danish ancestry, so maybe that's okay. What else? Yes? You're going to ask all the questions today?
Okay. Designated question.
That's okay. I'll pay you later. Thank you.
How does an auctioneer approach an estate that might have like 2 or 3 items that are related, or several items that are related? Is it just always one item at a time? Is that just an ethical thing? Or, I mean, there might be
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Like you might see a grouping that's obviously a grouping.
So how about
more separately, a doctor's bag, or
how about a suite of furniture?
a suite of furniture.
A love seat, or
Diptych. Mm-hmm.
and a pair of club chair or armchairs, or a dining chair. So there was a. I mean, yeah. So how do you do that? I guess that to reinterpret your question, even though everyone can hear you, if we get something that's related, do we sell it all at once as one object, or do we break it up and sell them individually?
Sometimes.
And that's an interesting question, and there isn't a hard or fast answer, and there is no right or wrong answer either. If it's something like the Cadwallader suite of seating furniture, which was made in Philadelphia for General John Cadwallader, a Revolutionary War hero general, upon his marriage, they received what is arguably the penultimate expression of American Rococo carved mahogany furniture. Sofa, easy chair, lolling chairs, card tables, end tables, mirrors. That probably was about a dozen pieces or something. Much of it has been dispersed and is actually either in museum collections or whereabouts unknown. But if it were together today, I would suggest to you that it would be sold separately because it is such an important suite of furniture that it probably wouldn't realize its full value if it was sold as one lot. And as auctioneers, which, by the way, I should also point out, we take things on consignment. We do not buy the inventory that we sell at auction. And by taking it on consignment, we are effectively business partners because we're trying to get as much money for you as possible, which means our commission will be greater. The more you make, the more we make. So we're sharing the same incentive. So if I was presented with that suite of furniture, selling them individually would make more sense because it would net you more money since you're our first and foremost goal. Providing you with a return is our goal. Now that also gives institutions the opportunity to buy things. Maybe one institution can buy them subsequently, lot after lot after lot, but they'd have to fight for them to do that, which would net you a higher return. And maybe that doesn't happen and things get scattered. So the Philadelphia Museum buys one in Williamsburg, gets one, and the MFA gets one in Boston, and the MFA gets one in Houston. And now I'm conflicted because I just broke up the best set of American furniture in history, but I've also scattered it into the public domain so more and more people can see it and learn from it and share it and enjoy the expression of the Chippendale Rococo aesthetic that was at its peak in Philadelphia the third quarter of the 18th century. So there are pros and cons to both situations. If it was a suite, let's roll the tape forward to 1910, and it's a whole dining room set, and you've got a table, 8 side chairs, 2 armchairs, a small sideboard, a big sideboard, a vitrine, all that type of thing that was made in factories in the Midwest, in the Great Lakes region, and dispersed all over the country. It's the kind of thing that people bring to the roadshow all the time, not the whole suite, but a piece of that. I would say let's leave it together because that's the only way you're going to get this stuff sold. Because nobody wants that stuff right now. So maybe 10 pieces of furniture brings $2,000 and they get to keep it together and off it goes to some other house. The other argument would be, and now I'm reversing myself, is nobody needs 10 pieces of furniture in a dining room these days because nobody entertains at home. Houses don't have dining rooms if they're new, or they have small dining rooms. And if we break it up and sell them in subsequent lots, if somebody wants to reassemble the lot for their dining room, great. And if they don't, then
They're just looking for a sideboard. They're just looking for a dining table. They're just looking for the
then it
chairs.
might make more in individual lots. So it really depends on what it is, what the mission is, who's consigning it. If it's an estate, as opposed to a living consigner, all the attorneys want is to turn this into money. These estates can't handle objects. It's like banks owning houses that are foreclosed upon. They do not want to be in the real estate business. So move it on. Turn it into money. I can divide money up more easily than I can divide up a queen-size bed. Mm-hmm. So I did mention the roadshow just then. Is that an opportunity to go sideways, or do you want to stay on the auction business for a little while? Yes, sir.
I have a question about the painting. After that was sold, and it surprised everybody,
Yeah.
did the owner have any insight as to where he got it, or how long it had been there? Obviously, it
Well,
came from somewhere.
okay.
Okay, so that was terrifying because which holiday was it? Jewish holiday.
Yeah.
So it sold, and immediately someone told somebody, and like every newscaster was there. And we hadn't even told the consignor yet that we just sold their
Right.
painting.
This happened in September, so it was either Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah, I think. I'm not sure. Forgive me if I got it wrong. But
So they weren't answering the phones.
right.
And
It took 2 days for me to get in touch with the consignor. And
It
when I
was-
finally got him on the phone, and he said, "How'd we do?" I said, "Well, we did pretty well. Almost everything sold. Maybe there's the Lincoln bookends may not have sold or something like that." And he said, "Well, how'd we do?" And I said, "Well, you did, and the painting, that little sort of painting of the three people, that 1,000,001. And you could, it's like, what?" He dropped was that him hitting the floor? Was that the phone hitting the floor? So what does he ask me? I said it was a Rembrandt. We sold it for 1,000,001. His first question after that was, No, is that enough money for a Rembrandt? Like, are you kidding? I was in the car going on another house call. I almost went off the road when he asked me that question. Like, you've got to be kidding me. So
the answer is yes, because it's one of his youngest pieces when he was a younger man. It wasn't his characteristic fellas with the hats and the things, which was later
the ruffle collars.
the ruffle collars and like you had to know there was only one of the series in a museum, and it was in a small museum. And if you knew that painting, then you knew this was right, because all of the characters, the models, were the same. So always in a different, costume or something, and which is how those three bidders knew exactly what they were looking at the second they saw it. And the fellow that I was bidding with in France said that he spends 8 to 12 hours a week trolling international auction houses for the pieces that he's looking for. And the fellow from Germany said
They're called
he
sleepers.
spent the last 20 years of his life looking for this painting.
Right, so you have to be a student of Rembrandt, and early Rembrandt, to know that this was a significant piece of
Right.
art. And as Kathy said, it wasn't his mature style. And
So it was perfectly valued. And the fellow in
And-
Germany said it's valued perfectly there. We can't go any higher.
so with that said, it did trade. So here's a great postscript for you. It leaves a basement in New Jersey to go to auction. It leaves us to go to Paris to be restored. It goes from Paris to Maastricht, the great fine art fair in Holland, to be unveiled to the world. It is purchased by...
Wait, and they took off the dreadful Victorian
Right.
frame and they had it restored, cleaned it, and had a beautiful Dutch black stepped frame made for it, traditional frame for it. And it looked stunning. It did look good.
And then, so from Maastricht, it went to, that was in March, 2 years ago. Then it went to the Getty in August to be in an exhibition. And then it went from the Getty to the Ashmolean Library at Oxford. And from Oxford, it went to the Louvre, where it was on view with other examples from this suite. So the 4 out of the 5 paintings were now put back together. And then it went to Shanghai. And I don't know where it is right now. I think it's back in Leiden. But the fact that this little picture, we had something to do with sending this thing on its way.
Yeah, and every single time it went to another museum, the newspapers could come back. It was just like the little painting that kept on giving. It was just, and then the TV show came in and did a segment on us, and it was a lot of fun.
Lot
It
of
was
fun.
just, we learned a lot. And then our photographer, who was our phone bidder, was in Paris and then went someplace else, and they were going to be back in Paris. We found out it was at the Louvre. We were like, Amy, you have to go to the Louvre. You have to go see the painting. So she stood there in the gallery for like hours, talked to everyone about this painting.
Did I get
Fun.
distracted?
I guess my question more was, did the owner have any insight as to how he got it?
Oh, so
How did it get to his basement in New Jersey?
his grandfather was an immigrant to this country and had a silk mill in Paterson, New Jersey when it was full of silk mills down there and began to make a little bit of money, and so he started collecting things, but he was not a dedicated, knowledgeable collector. He just bought stuff that he liked.
Yeah, and so then after the fact, the brothers got together and said, the man who consigned it to us, who was in charge of his brother's estate, who was the youngest, he said, I don't even remember this painting. And the oldest brother said, oh, I remember that painting. It was in the dining room. It was horrible.
Yeah, it was scary.
And then they started going through old photographs and then found the painting on the wall. Then started asking aunts, where did he get this? And she says they used to go on weekends to auctions. So somehow he acquired it.
And then I was at a fundraiser one night, cocktail reception at some country club, and a man sort of makes his way through the crowd, and he comes up to me and he said, you probably don't remember me, but my name is, and I consigned the Rembrandt to you. And I was like, not remember you? Are you kidding me?
Really well.
I'll never forget you. You practically changed my life. So that was fun.
When you're talking about that bidding process on this, how long a time span are we talking? A minute? A few minutes?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, for starters, we don't sound like livestock, right? We're not doing the mum and a mum and a mums. We're not livestock auctioneers. I learned how to sell at Sotheby's, so it's much more. It's more like spoken word. It's 500, 550, 600, 650, and it'll go like that, where I'll be at 1,000, 1,100, 1,200, 13, 14, 15, 15, 16 with me, 17. So, and I can do 100 lots an hour. Doesn't sound like it because I'm not doing the mums, but the mums are just showbiz. And so if you're doing 100 lots an hour, you're doing like, it's only a couple of seconds per lot, or like a minute, 30 seconds a lot. This probably took 3 minutes, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, it felt like an eternity. I will say that.
Well, I remember being on the phone and they skipped it to 300,000. So then it was, and I was waiting for John to say, I'm like, and so the next I didn't even know what the next increment was. And I said, well, what's the next increment? He said, I don't know.
I know it was.
Were we jumping to 50,000? Were we jumping to? Were we at 10,000? So
with that, there's also.
here's what's in it.
Yeah, you can also do it. Another two schools of thought. One would be you can go by 50,000s at that point because you're already up there. So what's it matter?
He was already jumping at $100,000.
Right. Or you could actually go at $10,000 and maybe you'll get more money. You might get one more $50,000 bid, but you might get 7 more $10,000 bids. So it's sort of, what do you do? How do you feel? You know, you got to feel your audience out. And also, as an auctioneer, you should know that we have so much happening up here. There are the absentee bids. They're the people in the room that are bidding. They're the telephone bids. I have a computer terminal either side of me and a third one over here. So the
which we're taking,
amount of
we're
information
taking
that's
bids
coming
from the
in,
internet as well.
and it's up to the auctioneer to control the room. So there might be 4 hands up in the air and someone on the telephone and a bid here on the computer, and I may ignore 3 of you out there, and I'll take the one person here and the computer, and I'll work them against each other until one drops out. And so once the computer drops out, then I'll continue with you, and I'll work you against the gentleman on the aisle, and I'll work you guys until you drop out, and then the gentleman with the suspenders against the lady in the front row, and then you're out, and now you're up against the phone. And the reason that we do that is so that you know what the next increment is going to be. So if Kathy's on the phone and you're at 100, the next one's going to be 125, 150, 175, 200. But if I'm skipping around the room and you're at 100 and 125 and 150 and 175 and 200 and 225 and 250, now you're back at 275, and that wasn't where you wanted to be. You wanted to be at 150 maybe. So it's much more methodical to play 2 people off against each other and then move on to another couplet and make another couplet. And that way everyone knows where they stand. And people are in the room going, I have my hand up. You're like, hello, I'm over here. And I was like, I see you, ma'am. It's okay. I'll get to you in just a minute. I have to work these 2 people first. And, you know, there's so many things. There's so many stories. Reserves. Here's another anecdote for you. Reserves are prior to doing the internet bidding, they were confidential. So we would publish a range of value known as an estimate. Let's say it's $8,000 to $12,000. The reserve can be as high as $8,000, but it can be as low as zero if they say, just sell it. I don't care. So normally it's about half. So with an $8,000 to $12,000 estimate, you have a $4,000 reserve, and the auctioneer can bid on behalf of the consignor up to the point of the reserve. So if it's $4,000, I might say $2,750, $3,000, $3,250, $3,500, $3,750. And then someone in the room says $4,000. Okay, now I've just brought everybody up to the reserve, and I have to stop unless I have more bids in my book. But if I don't, and Nils is in at $4,000, then hopefully you'll be in at $4,250, $4,500, $4,750, and so on and so forth. Well, I had a time, there was a consignor sitting in the room right about where you are, and I started off,
Started low.
right.
Started low.
So we might have had, let's say it was only a $400 reserve or something, but the guy knew his reserve, and I started off at $200, trying to get momentum, trying to get people participating and moving it up and getting the enthusiasm going and all this kind of thing. So I'm saying 200, 225, 250, and the guy stands up in the seat and he goes, "That's not my reserve."
But now everybody knows it's his
so
thing.
we also don't disclose our buyers. We don't disclose our sellers. It's totally anonymous. We're the broker. Until he stood up, and so now what do I do?
So then he did it 2 or 3 more times, and
said-
finally John had to say, "You can't do that."
Well, I said there's no reason to do that, and then I looked at the rest of the room and I said, well, you know who can sign those couple lots? Everyone laughed. We moved on, but it's, I mean, you think of the scenarios, it's probably happened. If you ask me the scenario, I won't remember. I can't pull it out of the depths, but if you can jog my memory, I can probably tell you a story. You've been waiting patiently to ask a question.
I was just wondering how, when people don't necessarily know the value of what they have, how you vet the requests to come and assess items.
So
Another good question.
yeah.
You guys are on them today.
Yeah. So if you
I don't
are
know
curious,
the answer to that, so I'll let Kathy do it.
So if you're curious, the easiest way is to send a few photographs, via email, and sometimes if room shots, sometimes you already know we'd like to sell this piece, this piece, this piece, this piece, we give you comps. We'll say if there's something that is a recognizable form, a recognizable artist who has an auction record, just like a real estate, houses in Sandwich, just because you think your house is worth $250 million, if a similar 3-bedroom house in Sandwich is selling for $850,000, so that's what the estimate's going to be. That's what the price ask will be. It's the same as in the auction business. So if similar chest of drawers, same period, roughly the same condition, sold in this range, that's why we give you a range of estimates. A lower estimate and the higher. There's a few that pop, but there's a middle ground in there. And so we kind of give you a range of estimates. Why we give you a range of estimates? Because it's...
Right. So we subscribe to some databases for fine art and antiques. Almost everybody fashions themselves an artist, a painter in retirement. So we get faced with ungodly amounts of art. And it's fantastic, priceless works of art, don't you think? And, on the outside, once
Yeah,
again,
we
it's
like
like,
it.
oh, yeah, that looks pretty cool. And on the inside, it's like, oh, I wouldn't hang that in his bedroom. So how do we figure out if it's good or bad? We go onto the databases and we look up prices, as Kathy said, same size, same artist, same composition, same subject
medium,
matter.
watercolor versus
And
oil.
since 2010 or 2015, I mean, you try and keep it in the last decade to keep your comparables as fresh as possible. There are also, back in my Sotheby's days, I used to deal with Polaroids, poorly developed Polaroids, no less. So I'd be looking at it going, does that chair have straight legs or cabriole legs? Or does that have a pad foot or a claw and ball foot? I mean, it was really hard to figure things out. Now, digital photography, stuff comes in, you blow it up, it's like, yes, 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 no, no, no. And even better are the real estate listings that are posted online. And we can
Zillow.
take, so how many times have I done this? I want to sell I want to sell some stuff, I'm moving. Oh, really? What's your address? they tell me 1313 Mockingbird Lane. So I'm on the phone talking to them, and I type it in there. And I say, oh, that's a lovely house. When you walk in the front door, you've got a marble top console table on a wrought iron base or something with an oval mirror on the side. And they're going, how'd you do that? I said, what do you mean? She goes, yeah, I do. How'd you know that? And I say, let's go a little further. So now I'm having fun. It's like, oh, you know, there's an oriental rug and your stairs are lined with brass tread liners and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, that's incredible. How do you know that? Well, you told me your address, so I put it into the computer, and up comes the Zillow listing, and now I'm taking a virtual tour of your house, and you didn't even invite me over, but we're going to go around and see what you've got. So, like that, I can avoid the wild goose chase by going through the house. So the one, this is the best of all. One woman said, well, as long as you're in my house, can we go into the garage? I want to show you some stuff that's there. I said, your garage isn't on the real estate listing. She goes, I know, I'm going to go outside and open the door. I was like, what? She must have thought I had a drone or something. Yeah, let me just buzz right up to the door while you open it up. That was a good one. Unforgettable. Yes.
I actually have one other question about the Rembrandt. It's interesting because you mentioned that your primary interest is in New Amsterdam or early New York, and here's this Dutch painting. I was wondering if there's any way to know, or if it's conceivable that the painting has been in this country, since the time of New Amsterdam, or if you know any other instances of someone carrying a painting like that across the Atlantic.
Well, it's small.
Yeah.
Right.
I suspect the odds of that are, I love the way you're stitching this conversation together. That was really good. I would think that's probably not the case. I think it was done, if he was 15, around 16, 25 to 20 to 25 or something like that, roughly 15, it probably did not come over. And if there was a set of 5, there was a set of 5. So they would probably have been kept together until something happened and they were dispersed. And they might not have been dispersed
Together.
as singles. They might have been 2 and 3 or 2, 1, 1, 1 or something like that. I mean, when it comes time to settle an estate, strange things happen. And for those of you who have collected antiques over the years, let's say there was an American chest-on-chest or highboy that was the most sentimental thing, and there were 2 children, and that was maybe the most valuable thing in the house. They would, before Americana was collectible, siblings would split it, and they'd put a top on the bottom and feet on the top, and you'd each have a piece of grandma's chest-on-chest or something like that. So there's no rhyme or reason as to how or when they got divided up. And for all we know, the 5th one, which is Taste, remember, it's about this big, oil on board, 3 people, crazy outfits, allegory for taste, may not even exist.
It
Might
could
have
been.
burned up in a fire like the music did last year in LA. It might have been on a boat coming over here and sunk. I mean, it might be hanging in a museum and no one, or in a storage.
Someone's house, yeah.
Until it comes up around and is discovered again, rediscovered, there's no telling where it might be, if it even exists at all. Okay, how about the plaid shirt in the left row? Left side, the gentleman on the left aisle.
I'm curious about how your responsibility with Antiques Roadshow comes about.
Oh, totally irresponsible. As you can tell. How does it come about? I mean, how do I get to do Antiques Roadshow?
And why and how are you selected for various shows?
Do you think am I not qualified? So, yeah, I mean, Roadshow's been around for 24 years. Next year's the
25th.
Right, the 25th anniversary. So, and I've only been doing it for 10 years, so they must have thought I wasn't qualified in the beginning. Or maybe the people who started out got tired and they came to the second string. But they had me out there. I do furniture. Kathy does what's called triage. So she is a little behind the scenes, as Nil said, but she also is front and center and is the one that's handing out the tickets to send people off
To the experts.
to the various specialist tables.
Yeah.
So I may help out with folk art or small decorations, but when I get filmed to do something on television, it's for the furniture.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because I guess it's what I did. That's what people think of me, or when they think of me as a furniture person as opposed to a paintings or jewelry person. And it was time. They'd known about me for a long time, and I got a phone call. Kathy and the kids and I were sitting at a restaurant having a late dinner, and the phone rang, and I said, yeah, okay, I'll call you back. I didn't take the call at dinner, and Kathy said, who was that? And I said, oh, that's Sam Farrell. He's the assistant executive producer of Roadshow. And
I went like this.
She was like, what?
That's exactly what I did. I said, get upstairs, get in the parking lot, and you call that man back.
Why is he calling? Yeah, she said, why is he calling you? I said, he wants me to go to Tulsa next week to film down there. She said, what'd you tell him? I said, I'll call him back. And that's when she hit me. That's when she sent me into the parking lot. And I said, we're having dinner. He can wait. I've waited, 15 years for this phone call. He can wait 15 minutes. And so I did call him back, and I had to, kowtow and say, oh, I would love to do that. When are we leaving? Tomorrow? Okay, I'll go. So I wound up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and one of the first things, actually the first thing that I actually filmed was a secretary, supposedly mid-18th century secretary. Then I could see the woman and her family bringing it across the floor on two dollies on its back.
Well, that's my favorite part of the roadshow is how people transport things in. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
The carriages, the hand trucks, the little red wagons, the whatever.
Grandma's wheelchair, she's walking, the things are in the wheelchair. It's...
That's true. And so she comes up to me, large woman comes up to me and says, I have an English secretary, it's 18th century, and it's mulberry. So I'm thinking, cool. I got a live one here. This will be fun. Anyway, we get up. She agrees to go on camera. Sam Farrell agrees to put her on camera. We get up there, and we're standing like this on either side of her secretary,
thing is
and
here.
waiting for the tape to start rolling. And she said, if you tell me this is a fake, I'm going to reach across this piece of furniture and punch you in the face. It was a fake for sure. And I thought, this is going to be great television. Not knowing that Roadshow edits like crazy, so 20 minutes becomes about 20 seconds, since that was my first outing. But we got through the whole thing, and I told her it was actually American-style walnut and 20th century. And we finished up, and she said, well, I'll just put it back in my living room. And she said, okay. And I said, may I ask you one more question? And she said, yeah. Of course. I said, I thought you were going to punch me in the face. Why didn't you do that? And she said, I totally forgot. I said, oh, I wish you had. It would have been great television. And then there was the person who had one tear coming down her face, and I said, are you crying? And she goes, yeah. I said, come on, cry. One tear, that's not, it doesn't count. Let it go. That didn't make it on TV either.
So how do you differentiate between the real thing and the copy?
John can see it across the room.
Sometimes you can see it across the room. Albert Sack, who was from the venerable firm Israel Sack, he used to say you could tell English from American by the accent. He was pretty skilled. It really depends on the object. You need to know. We should get Rosanna up here to tell us how you can tell old from new, because it's something that it's a skill that you acquire after looking at tons and tons and tons of objects. And so when we get letters from people who have just graduated or finished their accreditation with one of the appraisal societies and they want to do an internship, oftentimes we don't take them on because it's a work in progress. They've done their book work, they've filled on, they've checked all the boxes, they've done the report, but they don't know maple from birch or walnut from mahogany, and oftentimes they don't know old from new or red pine from white pine. It's really the kind of thing that you have to
Put the years in.
Right, you can't learn it in a book. You have to touch it and feel it and understand the difference between old surface, maybe even original surface, and then fake surface and all those kinds of things and subtleties and nuances that go along with it.
But a lot of times you can tell from the construction, or just looking at the proportions.
Tool marks, appropriate use of certain types of woods in certain places during certain periods from certain countries. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. So I can't answer that question more specifically than that, other than you learn by doing, I guess. Yes?
My question's for Kathy. When you're doing the triage
Mm-hmm.
and you realize somebody has a pretty valuable piece, do you keep a poker face?
Yeah. We're not allowed, I'm not allowed, that's exactly right. So you have to be an appraiser, or you have to be an appraiser, you have to have be a generalist to be at triage. And we're most of us are from auction houses. And then each city has just dozens and dozens of local volunteers that we use as runners. So they come in the door with their tickets. We used to give out 6,000 free tickets, and now we give out 3,000 free tickets. And it's a lottery system. You have to get it in, show your ticket. And a lot of times we get firearms, antique firearms. So, the police are out there, they're checking, they're zipping, they're doing things. But then they come to us, and they think that we're the appraiser, we're going to tell them the value. But we're just assessing what they have and sending them. We've got a whole box full of tickets of designations. We always have about 70 appraisers and 60-something different categories, and then we will send you to someplace. So, and every roadshow, and I'm not allowed to give them any value whatsoever. I have to be able to tell them if it's a print or a lithograph versus a paintings or a drawing for the separate tickets. And that can be very upsetting to people because they think they have a painting, a picture, and it's a print, and then they can throw a little fit, and I would have to give them a paintings picture, and they're going to be sent from paintings over to prints and posters. But I'm not allowed to tell them. They always ask, which one would you choose? Would you choose this or this? Because they're only allowed to have two things. They could have a set of gavels, or like a tea set is one object, and that could go to silver or porcelain and pottery. But I'm not allowed to say anything. But then I say to myself, oh my God, it's so good.
So the other thing that's interesting is that the roadshow has to get 3 hours of television, or they endeavor to get 3 hours of television from each city. So when we get there, on Friday, there are a couple of meetings in the afternoon, and then it starts, we have to be on set at 6:30, ready for the doors to open. And we go all day until the crowd stops. So
They're time tickets, though, too.
But there's also a sort of a Walt Disney World element to it, where you wait in line, and then you wait in line, and then you get to triage, then you get your ticket, and you think, oh, cool, I'm in. Well, you're in. Because then you go and wait in line, then you wait in line, then you get to the specialist table.
Yeah.
And if you have something that might be worthy of television, and we sit you down and wait then we get the producer to come over, so you wait again. And then once the producer says thumbs up, then you go to the green room and you wait again. So
you're going to get a little hair and makeup. There's a little drama.
There's a lot of waiting that
fun.
goes on, but there's a lot of eye candy happening. There's stuff going on all around you with people
And the
bringing.
people are so fabulous. They're just
and
so excited
everybody's-
to be there.
Everyone's talking to
The
each other.
average person drives between 200 and 300 miles to get there. So they're excited.
Yeah.
I process between 400 and 800 people a day. So and I think, how could you possibly do that? But they're so joyful.
Yeah, and so in order to get 3 hours of television, they need 52 spots. So they're looking for 52 needles in that haystack of stuff that people have brought in. And sometimes it's hard to get those things. Mm-hmm. It might seem easy, but so many people bring in ladder back chairs or spinning wheels or posters or whatever.
Well, we just filmed in Fargo, North Dakota about a month ago. Don't you know? And We got there at 6:30 in the morning. We got on that bus at 6 a.m. and it was 41 degrees out in June. And it turned out to be a nice, lovely day in the afternoon, windy. We were all outside. And one couple came in and she said, "Oh, you're not from here, are you?" And I said, "Oh, could you tell from my accent?" She's like, "No, I could tell you're wearing a down coat, dear. It's summer." I was freezing.
Yeah, that was in a place called Bonanzaville, which is their version of Sturbridge Village or something. And so that it's going to be good television because they filmed it on Main Street outside, as Kathy said. So it was cold, but the backdrop is very cool. So that'll air next year. So we do our filming now, and then the seasons begin with the new episodes in January, mid-January usually. And 6 cities turns into 18 episodes, which they spread out and pull apart by showing reruns in between and things like that.
They also do main things. They do over-the-shoulder things. They'll film us at Triage and film the people online, and they do a great job. It's a great
fun.
job.
They keep changing it. They used to be in convention centers, great big, huge halls, and there was an anonymity to those buildings, and so now they're doing them in smaller venues. Like on Monday, they were at the Winter Tour Museum. We were in Bonanzaville. They were at the Philbrook Museum in San Antonio. I mean, they go to smaller venues like that, trying to make it more interesting, and that's why they can only give out half as many tickets.
Right. And last summer we did the Coronado Hotel in San Diego, which was really swanky and fun to be there. So I guess that was paid back. We got North Dakota this year.
Yeah, I was in, what's the other, there was a Cedar Falls, South Dakota? Cedar Rapids is Iowa, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, right.
Isn't Cedar Falls in South Dakota? North Dakota? Who can keep track of those things? Anyway, I was in another city in North Dakota several years ago, and somebody drove over from Maryland with her family. And as Kathy said, there are groupies, and people will travel a couple hundred miles, but this was the most
try to get the tickets.
Extreme situation. She said, "I've been trying to get tickets up and down the East Coast unsuccessfully for years, and when I saw in January that you guys mentioned you were going to be in South Dakota or North Dakota, wherever we were that year, I said, I can get tickets to that." So she did. She piled her family in the car, her roadshow fines in the back, and drove a week across the country, did the roadshow, and a week back, and made it a family vacation. It was crazy. I mean, Corpus Christi had people coming in from all over Oklahoma, Nebraska, Louisiana, all over Texas. It was, people love that show. It's amazing. The idea that it's gone on for almost 25 years is unheard of. Mm-hmm. One of the longest running shows on television. Okay, I've been waiting for you to ask. It better be a good one.
I don't know. When people are given the appraisal at the Antiques Roadshow, it seems to me that more often than not they want to keep it. They just wanted to know the value and how to insure it.
Yeah.
But if they do want to sell it, is the roadshow in any way there to give them an idea, or are they just on their own?
No.
So
Well,
they're just on their own.
we are absolutely prohibited from soliciting business when we are on set. I mean, while we are working there.
Right.
There is a table near the exit booth, near the feedback booth. There's a table where we are allowed to put our business cards out.
And every single person who comes to the roadshow with a ticket, they get a brochure, and it has a list of the appraisers
All the participants
of that city. So, and also a page in it where you could write down what the appraiser says. Yeah, and so you could write down notes. You're not allowed to photograph. You can't do like a selfie with John. Are you allowed to do that anymore?
You can't, but they do it all the time.
Yeah, so anyway, they can write down what they could do, and they would circle what appraiser they saw, and then you could go to the Antiques Roadshow, and there is their contact information.
Right.
An email is there that they could contact.
Yeah, so
them.
so that table with the business cards, as it started out, everyone had business cards out there. Now people are having postcards next to business cards or brochures next to business. Everyone's trying to distinguish themselves from each other.
We'll tell them about that story about
one-upsmanship.
Claire, when you were just a junior at Sotheby's.
Claire, Beckman,
The
the table.
the Seymour table.
Yeah,
Because we were
oh, that part of the table.
94.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It was what, 1994. You weren't on the roadshow.
96 probably. So anyway, I got to put on my thinking cap going back that far. Remember, it's over 3 decades in the business now, so pulling that stuff up from the depths isn't as easy as it used to be. So let's see. The roadshow is in Secaucus, New Jersey, and the twins were there. They were almost at the height of their popularity, and
John worked with one of them.
right. So I worked with Leslie Keno at Sotheby's, and Lee Keno and I both went to the Hamilton College, and so I've known those guys forever. Anyway, Leslie came back to work on Monday, and he said, basically, if I'm on the phone, find me, interrupt me. If I'm in the building but not at my desk, find me. I mean, all these superlatives.
I did the roadshow.
He said, if someone
saw this woman.
Right, if someone named Claire calls, I don't care what I'm doing, get me. Turns out Claire was the person who brought a D-shaped games table to the roadshow, and the top was off the base, and the legs were up in the air. But anyway, it had a label on the underside that said John and Thomas Seymour, Creek Square, Boston. And it had an old grungy surface on it. And so, because we're not allowed to solicit business, it's up to somebody to take the initiative to call one of the appraisers. And that's why Leslie was saying, if I get a call from someone named Claire, find me, because it's probably about this table. So she called, got him on the phone. Yes, we'd love to come and see you. Okay, So Leslie and I go out there to her house. And we pull up in the driveway, and there's a guy with a video camera, VHS. I mean, was big. It wasn't enough iPhone. And he's basically filming the entire thing, us getting out of the car, documenting it. And she said, oh, that's my ex-husband. Don't worry about that. He just doesn't want me to be taken advantage of. Like, by me in a bow tie and Leslie in his bespoke suits, I don't think we can do much harm here. And so we get in the house, and she has us right where she wants us, and she's playing us like a fish on a line. We walk in the hallway, and I look to my left, and there's the table between 2 windows, just like that, between 2 windows. And she takes us through the entire house first, looking at everything, and I mean everything, until we finally got down to the living room. And then we went through everything in the living room until we got to the end wall. And then, thank goodness, finally we see this table. It was torture. And the table's fantastic. We load it, blanket wrap it. He's filming the whole thing just to prove that we've removed the table from it's in my car. We're in our first house in South Orange that we paid $122,000 for. And the table this was a Friday afternoon, so I put it in the dining room with a moving blanket over it. And
Our toddler's running around.
yeah, Tupper's running around. We've got
He
no
said I was gonna-
security system, nothing. It was just a little Victorian house with this table over there. Anyway, Kathy said, what's that? I said, it's a games table. It's from Ramsey, New Jersey.
I said, well, how much is it worth? And he says 2 to 3. I said, oh, okay, cool. I ignore it. He goes to work on Monday. January is their big Americana sale at Sotheby's. And I'm walking through the galleries, and he said, oh, that's the table that's the table that I brought in.
That was in our dining room.
That was in our dining room. And I walk over to it, and I look at the little card, and it says $200,000 to $300,000 on it. And I thought, Ted was kicking soccer balls in here. Oh my God, that was in my house.
And it was worth a lot more than our house. And then it sold for
Yes, exactly.
and then it sold for $500,000.
Yeah.
And it was quite a great success story.
Yeah.
And there's so much more to it, but the identical table from the same, it was made as a pair, and the pair exists. So kind of like that Rembrandt, the other one is out there, and it's in the Kaufman collection, which has since been given to the National Gallery. So you can all go and see it, because this one was purchased privately, but it had the same label. And when we opened them up, I said to Leslie, look at that, the boards are cut from the same log, because the fletches, the grains in the mahogany matched table to table. And we didn't have the ability to put them side by side, but there is a picture of one in a book open. The other one, the Kaufman one, was in the Kaufman book open, and you could compare them. So that was pretty neat.
Yeah, those were the days when you used to do research through books.
Yeah.
And catalogs, auction catalogs, and they would remember which auction a similar form was there, and they'd have these walls of research reference books.
Yeah. The good old days. And then Leslie Keno's, the twins' father, was sitting at the bar that we went to afterwards for drinks following the auction, and Claire Beckman was there, and she walks up to Ron Keno, who's sitting at the bar. I don't think she knew who he was, and walks up to him and says, "Young man," meanwhile, he's totally white-haired, jacket. He was not a young man. And he says, "Young man, I just sold a table for $500,000. How'd you like to take a trip around the world with me?" So, there are a lot of good stories, a lot of good human interest stories. I mean, I could go on and bore you guys to tears, but it really is a business unlike any other, and that's one of the things that we love about it so much. Whether it's the roadshow or the regional or the major auction house, there are no two consignments that are the same. People's circumstances are different. It might be a horrific divorce. It might be an estate. It might be just people downsizing. Whatever the case may be, we have to be able to go in and deal with the emotional spouse or the bereaved child or the whatever the case may be. And we're wearing lots of different hats, and we're going in to look at this, and we'll come out with that. It really doesn't, there's no rhyme or reason as to what's going to happen when you enter a house. And I also tell people, just a couple weeks ago, we insist on getting photographs ahead of time these days in order to make sure that we're not going on unsuccessful journeys, because we've been on plenty of them. And I was just on a wild goose chase recently. I mean, I did not insist. Anyway, I let my guard down. I went on a house call, and it turned out to be a bust. And the guy said, "Oh, I'm so sorry I wasted your time." And I said, "You haven't wasted my time. I got up here. I advised you on your collection. You're happy, I'm unhappy, but we're going to be, you may refer me to somebody else. I got to see this. Whatever the case may be. One has no idea how a visit will turn into a consignment or not. Or, this person told that person, and then I get a phone call saying, "Hey, I hear you're in the auction business," or something.
We also do appraisals. We do a lot of appraisal work. So.
Right, so that's another thing. Appraisals turn into consignments oftentimes, but they might not be immediate. It might be 5 years later when the parents are dead and the kids show up and they open the filing cabinet and there's an appraisal for the contents of the house and it has our name on it.
Right.
Who are they going to call? Sandwich Auction Gallery, of course.
Yeah.
Because they're right down the road.
I'd like to go back to the feedback booth for a minute.
The feedback booth.
Yeah, it's always fun.
Here I am. This is Grandpa's antique Egyptian spittoon that
Yeah,
we've had for eons.
yeah.
And when you see it, that this is just junk. Do they get immediately moved through?
So we give them a ticket for antiquities. It could be a fake pre-Columbian something. That's not my specialty, so I send them off that way. I have to send them to the correct, because you don't want to send a guest. They're guests, right? So you don't want to send them to wait online and then they say, "Oh no, you should really be in arms and armor." You want them to be.
Well, they do get a fast pass to the front. If they have to go from one line to another after waiting forever, we can walk them to the front of another line. But you try to avoid that.
Right.
But Kathy also, as you were asking, she has to be stone-faced. She can't let on.
I just have to know the category.
Right. All she can do is say, "Here are your 2 tickets."
You need, what would you choose? I have these 3 things. Which one would you choose? And I'm like, the ones that you are the most curious about. I can only give you 2 tickets.
But something else. Here's another.
They're so nice. The appraisers are so nice. So
here's another perspective that I've often thought about, and that is that the roadshow posts the touring cities in February. New episodes air in January. The new cities get posted in February to us, I guess, and then anyway, the public finds out about it. So let's say it's February. And we're filming in August. So that's what, 2 to 8, that's about 6 months. Someone gets their tickets in February. They show up in Boise, Idaho with that really ridiculous, horrible, worthless piece of garbage. You've had 6 months to think about what you want to bring to the roadshow, and you came with that?
Yeah.
Like, and you came dressed like that for television? You really think this is going to get you on TV and you're dressed like that? What are you thinking? I mean, it's amazing to me how many people say, oh, I grabbed it on the way out the door. What's this worth? And they've had months, weeks to think about what they want to bring to the roadshow. So, let's say they do have something that's totally cool. So it doesn't have to be expensive to get on television. It has to be a great story or a great object or a fake. I mean, it could be a fake, but it can't be one of those fakes where it's going to be devastating to the person on camera because you don't want to embarrass anybody. At least they don't want to embarrass anybody. I think it makes great television. But we call that kicking them in the shins when we're going to film a fake. So
He takes great joy in that.
you guys, this is a closed community. Everybody's welcome, as you heard. But what we talk about stays here.
He's filming it.
I know. So people have, in order to be able to get put on television, they have to own the object themselves, 100%.
Yeah.
Can't be a share, can't be my mom's and I brought it in. It has to be theirs. Because once something winds up on television and it's worth a fortune, you're opening a horrible can of worms. So tons of people make it to the show with a great object, and
But
it gets
filmed.
appraised, or they might have a great object, and you say, "Oh, thank you very much for bringing this in. Tell me about it." And they go, and they tell you everything. Like they give you a full Wikipedia entry on that nondescript Navajo belt. Well, see ya. You know more about it than the specialist does. Why in the world would it put you on television?
Yeah.
And you know what it's worth. So there's going to be zero response when the guy goes, well, that's $7,000 to $10,000. And you'll be like, I thought it might have been more like 15. You're like, that's terrible television. They want the spontaneity. They want that response. They want somebody to be like, oh my God, that's so cool. So, there's so many things and parameters that prevent or permit somebody to go
To be aired.
to be on TV.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Well, they might cut
people
it. Yeah.
don't get shot down immediately at the triage booth. They
No,
don't
they-
want to be shot down there. They want a roadshow experience.
Yeah.
And so they want to wait in line and in that line and in that line and make it to the front
They're
of the
talking
table.
to the people
And
around them. And
we used to say it's got sentimental value or it's got nominal value, so we're not hurting people's feelings. But what does that mean? Is it 50 cents or is it $50? Or, so now we just tell them $25, $15, $100, and they're much happier knowing a
Yeah.
concrete number.
And sometimes they're really excited. Wow, it's $50.
There was one of the best things I never filmed, and I still am sorry it didn't happen, was a leather pig. I know, it sounds crazy. I think it was in Corpus Christi. And I say that because I cannot keep these cities straight, and I've only been doing it for 10 years. I don't know how the folks that have been there since day one keep them straight, but some of them say, oh yeah, that was Atlanta in 1913, and this was in, it's like they know it all. But a woman showed up with a pig. It was leather. It was about this big. But it was made by Abercrombie and Fitch. It was that type of thing, known affectionately as a Park Avenue milking stool, because it was the kind of thing that shows up in these posh apartments, and you'd put your feet up on it, and it was in those paneled libraries. Well, the woman who bought it got it at a thrift shop, and she paid, $80 for it or something like that. And so here I am. She's got this pig under her arm with her husband. And she's telling me where she got it, and I'm telling her what it is and all this kind of thing. And her husband was so mad that she even brought it in. First of all, that she spent $80 on this piece of garbage. And And then I called it a Park Avenue milking stool, and he was like, what? There's a name for that? Park Avenue? Like the Park Avenue? And I said, yeah. And I said, these are Abercrombie and Fitch. They're early 20th century. They're totally collectible. They come in all different forms. Pigs, elephants, giraffes, whatever, what have you. Pigs are the most common. And I said, I actually have one under my desk at work. And she's like, you see? She hits him really hard. You see? I told you this was good. I told you this was good. He even has one of these. And then she said, so what's it worth? I gotta tell. What's it worth? And I said, $300 to $500, pretty easily. And if you didn't have that sticker like plastered on the back, which is going to ruin the surface when you take it off, it's probably worth more, maybe $500. And she starts going, ah! I can't get my voice up that high. She sounded like the pig. She's going, ah! I told you it's worth something. It was like a yard sale. Everything she had in her pockets and her backpack, it was like flopping all over the place, hitting the ground. She's screaming. People are turning around like this. What is going on in the furniture booth? It was beautiful. It was perfect. It was priceless. And it was not caught on camera. It was such a bummer. Her husband basically walked away. He was so embarrassed. And she was so excited.
It's good to be right.
It's true. So are we done here? Are we going to keep going? Oh, we're not done yet.
Let me just ask you, in the same vein of television, you mentioned Strange Inheritance in the very beginning.
Yeah.
And I've seen that show on a number of occasions.
Mm-hmm.
Could you just kind of briefly tell how that painting was selected to be in that particular program and how it came about?
Sure.
That was Jamie.
Sure. The Rembrandt, it's a gift that keeps on giving, as you can see. So let's see, it hammered down for $1.1 million, and we closed up and went off, and Kathy and I were sitting there having dinner that evening at about 7:30, and I got a text from a colleague of ours who said, this is all over the art newspaper in London. Your painting has just hit the papers. And it was like, that was where the pebble dropped, and it was like, it just blew up after that. And so...
It was probably 3 years later.
No, immediately after that, the local television stations came, and then shortly thereafter, I got a phone call from Fox Business News saying,
That's right, yeah.
we want to do this. This is such a cool story. We want to film you guys and all that stuff. And I said, okay, I'm in. And they said, well, there's one small problem. We have to get the consigners to participate, and we need the painting. And I said, well, forget it. It's not happening. They want to remain totally anonymous. It's just not going to happen. So I insisted. They went away. I spoke to the consigner at the same time, and he said, no, we don't want to do it.
We don't want anybody to know who we are.
So they went away, and then 2 years later, maybe, Strange Inheritance called back, and they said, do you think enough time has gone by? As Kathy said, this thing keeps coming back to life. So again, here it is, coming back. Do you think enough time has elapsed that the family might be willing to do that episode, because it is such a great story? And I said, I'll check. And sure enough, the three brothers put their heads together and they said, sure, we'll do it. So I called back the producer and I said, they'll do it. And he said, cool. You still have the painting, don't you?
No.
No, it's on a world tour. No, I don't have the painting. And so he said, well, then I don't know if we can do it. I said, I've got some pretty good pictures of it if you want to reproduce it. And they made this reproduction of the painting. And I said, if you reproduce the painting, I want it. And he said, you want it? I said, yeah, I'll put it in the office.
It's in our front hall. Oh my God,
So-
people love it. Yeah.
So then it was August, 2 years ago, I guess. 2 years ago this August, they came and they filmed for 3 days, and
Oh yeah.
and then it aired
We were a tizzy.
Then it aired the following January.
John was a cool breeze. Amy and I were like, what are you going to wear? What are you going to wear?
I knew what I was going to wear. Bow tie, blue blazer, khaki pants. It's the uniform. No question. So that's how that happened. Yes, a new hand in the crowd.
Has there ever come across anything you didn't want to sell because you wanted
Oh, all the time. Seriously?
He
So,
loves
that's a
everything.
good question. I am not a collector. I never grew up in the business. My dad's an academic, my mom an art-oriented person. She had a gallery, but we did not grow up in the business. So I don't go to house sales. I don't stop at antique shops. I keep driving.
Except today.
Yeah, I stopped at Rosanna's today. But I mean, I am not that guy that sleeps in a car to get #1 ticket for an estate sale or anything like that. So I think the way that I scratch the itch is by handling so much property at the auction.
Yeah.
Great stuff comes in and great stuff goes out. Now, with that said, we do buy things from time to time. So I will bring it in. To answer your question, I will not handle something because I want it. I'd rather put it into the auction and let it run its course, and maybe I'll bid on it, but I won't not take something.
Yeah.
And so, just to also make sure that you guys understand how arm's length the transaction is, we don't bid in the sales room. So if I want something, if I want to bid on that bracket with the little vase on top, I would not be able to stand there and execute bids for myself in the front of the room because that just that sends the wrong message.
Yeah.
Our employees can't do that either.
Yeah.
So what we say is, if you guys like something that's in the sale,
They want to buy something for a brother or something, yeah.
for any
Whatever
reason,
right.
you're allowed to bid if you put your bid in
As a
before
left-
the auction
yeah, a
starts.
left bid.
It's called an absentee bid or a left bid.
Right.
And so if you really want to make sure you get it, if that's in at 1 to 200 and you have to own it, put 1,000 on it. And bidding's probably going to stop at maybe 225, but at least you have there is flexibility built into your bid because it will keep going for a while. Put in your maximum bid.
Right.
But you can't put in 1 to 200 and then get outbid and then go.
So there are lots of times that we get collections in that I don't have an appreciation for, and the more you learn about something, the more you learn about it, the more people come in to check it out, other experts in that field. Like we had a whole collection of flags, and it was just a huge flag. And then the more you learn about something, the more you appreciate it, the more you like it.
Then you might want to bid on it.
Then maybe, but I mean, I didn't on that thing. But there was jewelry, and we had this. Was it 10 carats? We had a 10-carat diamond ring, which I thought was garish, so big. I mean, it was a monster. Yeah, and we sold it for about $100,000. But I called like all my girlfriends up. I was like, everyone has to try it on. And by like the end of the 3-week exhibition, I was like, really, it's not that big.
So, I told you there are anecdotes and stories that go along with
Yeah.
everything. She just jogged another memory. There was a guy from the Boston area, self-made guy, high school dropout, made a bunch of money, and he has retained, not anymore, but he had retained my services to look at a couple of forms, to vet some things for him at Sotheby's and Christie's so he could finish his collection. We were walking through the Winter Antique Show, and we sort of went down 2 aisles like this, and I bumped into him. Kathy and I bumped into him and his wife at the end of the aisle as we were going to go our other ways. Hey, John, how are you? Have you guys got anything in your auction for me? I see you have a sale next week. I mean, what might I be interested in? And I said, well, I don't have anything that you're looking for, but we do have a 10-carat diamond ring that your wife might be interested in. And she looked at me deadpan and she goes, I don't downsize. She had a thing on her finger that was so big. And as you might have surmised,
speechless.
I am rarely at a loss of words. And I said, well, you could make it a baguette. I said, but it was, and I don't know how she got her hand out of those painted on blue jeans, because that ring was huge. But anyway, that was pretty crazy. But stuff. It's like I say, it's
fun.
It's an unusual business.
Yeah.
They call it the second oldest business in the world. But that's good. You guys laugh pretty quickly. Usually it takes longer for that fuse to light and the bomb to go off. But anyway, it's fun. We enjoy it.
Can I get in one more question?
Absolutely.
What would you?
You have 20 minutes worth of questions.
Minus just something that's trending right now, like you say, like there's the lunch boxes, there's the motorcycle helmets, collected, hot, available. Like what's that magic item that some of us might find around? That is like, wow, this is something that's really cool. It's going to be taking off.
Oh, so you want me to predict what's going to be trending?
You must see a little bit of trends.
Oh, insider trading, exactly. Something, I left my crystal ball in my other pants.
From the 20s, like typewriters or something.
Typewriters, well, you know what?
Cameras. Well, the agent's almost on.
The stuff the third largest auction house in the world is, after Sotheby's and Christie's, is what? Right. What does Heritage sell?
Coins and stamps.
So coins and stamps, but they also sell an ungodly amount of movie posters. So those, things that you would have crumpled up and thrown away. So they're getting crazy poster prices in the six figures for rare posters. Mm-hmm. So movie posters, sports memorabilia, not just cards, but gloves and bats and uniforms if they are the right thing.
Yeah.
Sotheby's and Christie's and Heritage actually are selling couture, notably handbags.
Yeah.
Go figure, right?
Right, and they're easily faked, so it's always.
But Birkin Hermes bags and Prada bags and all those things that I don't know anything about are bringing, right, 5 figures, 6 figures. Crazy prices. So there are evolving markets like that. I went to the Americana exhibition in January at Sotheby's, and what did they have on one floor, on the 7th floor? But they had skateboards. That's what I said. Only I said, really? Like, are you kidding? Skateboards? Well, there must have been 200 of them.
That's cool.
They were never outfitted with trucks and things. They were the boards, and the art was on the bottom of the boards, and it was made by some designer named Delicious or something. Again, something I'd never heard of before, and it was one lot. So there's an example of one lot. All these things being sold together, and the estimate was.
Guess.
800 to 1.2 million dollars. It sold. Right around the corner from that, that was on that wall, and you walk around the petition, and they had made a smaller gallery for one painting that was the size of that wall. 1888, never out of the artist studio before. Stunning painting, and I am having a mildly senior moment where I'm forgetting the artist's name, but it was $30 to $50 million. They had to take the frame apart. They had to roll the painting off the stretchers and then roll the painting and ship it in a container from the artist studio in Paris over to New York and then reassemble it, et cetera, et cetera. Now, estimate aside, if you could have 200 skateboards or one magnificent work of art that was only out of it was a Bouguereau, I think, only out of the artist studio one time, but never out of the family and never out of the family's possession until that day that it was going up for auction. I wouldn't take the skateboards. But then again,
We're dinosaurs.
right. I love brown furniture. People ask, when's it coming back? Again, I have no idea when it's coming back.
But also what the magazines are showing, what the designers are showing, what the architects are showing. There was this whole trend of the decorators making those soft upholstered ottomans to be used as coffee tables. And so everyone kind of has those, but now they're soft. You can't put a drink on them. Now you need those trays. So those great big silver-plated double-handled trays that we would get, $5 a box for, are now, fetching, $100 to $300, $400 because everyone now needs a tray because they all have these ridiculous, useless
Tufted
coffee tables,
tufted
tufted ottomans. So,
Yeah, I guess
Magazines
that's
can
also
help.
why I'm not in the contemporary art department, is that I just don't see, I'm not a good predictor of the future or of fashion. I'm not that guy, so I don't trade stocks, I suppose. I'm not a trader in either sense of the word. Okay, I am happy to continue asking questions. I am also noticing that refreshments are set up in the back, so are we able to break and go to refreshments, and then we will talk
And
to
we can ask
people in the
people
room?
if they want to ask anything.
And I'll see if I can pull up those photos of the other Rembrandts, so you'll understand how people were able to spend $1 million sight unseen.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We got credit for bringing the good weather earlier, but I want
Yeah,
responsibility
I'm
for
glad I rolled up the
what's
window.
happening right now.